So while those videos are uploading, I'm continuing with this. So from 73 Mastic, I get moved to this place here. And I'm saying, wow, that's really interesting that this is right back to the place that I've almost been, in a lot of videos I've been talking about. But these memories were not in my head. So what's even more interesting is that as I'm talking, as I just start to remember this, right? There's a kid here. Well, a kid. I mean, he's a little bit younger than me, and he starts telling me a story, and he's like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "That's crazy that you almost been that's happened to you." He's like, "That happened to me too." He starts to tell me about Spaceplex, and I'm like, "Holy shit, I remember Spaceplex." Now, I'm sorry. The point being is that I never went there a whole lot when I was a kid. Twice within like the same twice, you know what I'm saying? Like once for like 20, 30 minutes. And the next time I went there was a kid that almost got fucking kidnapped. He starts telling me the fucking story. I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, holy shit, little buddy. Wow. He's the kid that got fucking kidnapped the second time that I was at fucking Spaceplex. I am sitting here saying to my fucking self, that is real fascinating, man, because I'm sitting there and he's describing it, and I'm like, bro, I was right fucking there. He was like, it was a birthday party, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, bro, that was a sting. That was a sting. There was so many fucking FBI and fucking CIA and fucking people that were there. They knew that kids were disappearing inside the area. No shit. Right after this kid got kidnapped, and I mean, they were all there. The kids were there. We were all being used as bait. This kid gets napped. He's like, yeah, I was like this age and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, holy shit. I remember getting in the car going to look for the other cars because once the kid got snatched, everything was shut down. They knew that kids would disappear and they weren't about to let one of their fucking under their watch, and yet fucking it happened. When it did happen, everything got so fucking locked down, they had no place to bring the fucking kid. So they bring the kid back to fucking Spaceplex. Now he starts saying this to me and I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, is there any fucking sign of paperwork about this? Because this incident it had to be so close to the same exact time period as the story of the sewer that I was just talking to you about in the other videos. And I'm saying, holy shit. I'm like, they got me in this house. Now, I remember when this person got snatched. When he was dropped back off, he had almost no concept. Like, he had a concept of what happened, but he, like me and a few other kids were talking to him, and it was like, you were about to die. And the concept of death, he understood kind of, but he didn't understand. When we explained to him that death meant he would not exist anymore, he started to run around in circles. I'm sorry, it's just funny because very much so the personality is the same from back then. The point being is that minus some blocked, the point being is that I remember one of the men that were there, we went looking. I was a kid, but I came with the man, one of the adults that were, we went looking for a second or third car in the area, scouts. This was all around about the same time period as what happened up the road near that sewer with me and my cousins. Now, the point being is that it's just interesting that this person is here. And the main question I asked him was, is there any documentation of this happening? In order to figure out, because I'm pretty sure that some of the people that knew about the sewer situation were also some of the people that were around about that time period when this happened. So what I'm saying is that it's interesting to me. The second thing is with a couple of the other characters that have been here. Very interesting, man. One of the guys that was here, he seems very nice as a person, and he was a big guy. I could go into more, but the point is that hint, it's just, the point being is that when me and this guy were talking, and I'm saying, holy shit, I'm like, bro, right before when he starts saying, oh yeah, I went to jail, and this year, I went to jail out here for dealing this, and fucking, I was pretty big out there at the time, and blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, well, what year did that happen in again? And he says the year, and I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, this dude. And I've already said this in another video, but the guy, in other words, I was like 15, 16. Yeah, I was like 15, I think. Maybe I was 16. The point being is that so I'm thinking that this was all around the same time period as fucking all the other crazy shit. The dude, he's like, well, I went to jail, and I'm like, oh, and I started to describe some of the things that he was wearing the night that I encountered him. Now, I don't know if he remembers this or what, because the only thing is I remember talking to him, and I had my mother's station wagon at the time. My other car was not, it was in the shop, so I'm thinking this was right around about the same time period, or it was a little bit later on when I got the car back, but it still had to go back to the shop. I'm not exactly certain. I'm thinking it was like fucking, it was decently like chilly outside, so I'm thinking it was like more towards like 16. But that would have been 97, not 96. So then it could have been right during that whole process of me like backing into the wall and not having a car because I screwed up the whole rear end of the car. But the point being is that, and this video is 9 minutes old at this point. The point being is that the guy, when me and him were talking, he was completely blown out of his mind on whatever the fuck he was doing, crack or fucking this and that. And I'm talking to him, and I'm like, no hard feelings. I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, you and me bumped into each other right before you went to jail. And he just kept avoiding talking about it, And I'm like, bro, you went to jail right after you met me. I'm like, do you remember anything? And he wouldn't say nothing. But I just mentioned a person's name, and I'm saying, oh wow, blah blah blah. I'm like, I'm like, do you know so-and-so? Because right around that same time period, I was being, people tried to attempt to set me up right after that happened. And it's very interesting that I just bumped into one of these people. Now, I thought that all this was bullshit. The reason that I heard that the guy went to jail was because right after he met me, I had my gold chains around my neck, and he goes off and tries to get a couple of the people. They were planning, supposedly, they were planning to fucking kill me and throw me into the fucking dunes or whatever the fuck it was. That, because it was like a beachy type place. So it's really interesting to me that freaking this guy was also here a few times. He actually left and then came back for about a week, and I still got this guy. You know, I'm still calling this dude, and I'm like, hey, what's up, man? Blah blah blah. Now, this is real fucking interesting, man. All I'm saying is that from that point, it was like, Anthony, get the fuck out of here. This guy's over here, blah, 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 trying to get you killed, blah, blah, blah. When I left that situation all those years ago, back in like 96, 97, I mean, it was 6 hours after that this guy went to jail. And it was about 2 days later that it was on the news, and I was like, oh shit, I just met that dude, blah 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 blah. Holy shit. Like that was like a slight catch of reality, but like most of this shit I did not believe. So it's really interesting to me that that this is something that that happened. And you know, I not only was this guy here, but then there was the other guy that was here too, and this other guy was here, and then this kid, and I'm saying, wow, that's really interesting, and a few other, and I'm saying, wow, this is fucking crazy. This fucking place, this fucking up the road is where fucking they tried to fucking, you know, and it's blah 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 blah, and you know, this is like certain things like where that were said during that whole situation where up the road where the sewer situation took place. And it was like, you know, it was like, oh, there was a lot of kids going missing out here, just like there was a lot of kids going missing out near the fucking Spaceplex. And this is the shit that I remember these things, and I'm saying I need to freaking, and I just don't even know what to think anymore. I don't want to make this video too long, and I don't know what I have covered and what I haven't covered, but then there's another person, and I'm saying, wow, man. I'm like, whoa, fucking wow. So they've made sure that they put me from one highly fucking volatile situation to another fucking highly volatile situation. It is that real. Yeah. Totally, yo. Totally, son. And then there's this. Then there's this, right? Okay? There's this. So, and I'll get to that in the next video, but this is already fucking way too long. So, ta-da. And that's why I brought up the other fucking person too, because that's, and I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me.